Chapter 7 The Valley of Water. Up and away like the dew of the morning, soaring from earth to its place in the sun. Thus may we pass from the world and its toiling, only remembered by what love has done. The following morning, Kandima wakened early. Will I go to Singapore today? She asked Sadoy. The boat is down there at the wharf. Sadoy laughed. You will not get on it. You needn't waken so early. There was no more sleep for Kandima. She must run with Sindoy to the crown of the hill on which Tuon's house stood. Directly below, in the bright blue water, lay the ship. In Kandima's sight, it was large and elegant beyond description. The funnel was blue, and tiny figures could be seen climbing its stairs. Oh, Sadoy, what would Mukit say? He has never seen a ship. Can it go over the valley of water by itself? Doesn't anything pull it? The gardener's wife laughed again at the funny questions the little jungle girl could ask. You just wait, Kandima. By tomorrow this time, you will know all about ships. They walked back to the big house hand in hand. As is often the case, once caught in the wonders of busy city life, Kandima was surprised at nothing anymore. Everything was too wonderful. Nothing was impossible. She scrambled into the red bus beside little Eileen that evening without the slightest hesitation. She had completely forgotten her experience of 3 days before when she had run screaming into the jungle at the first sight of one of these red creatures. Down the wharf, the ship assumed gigantic proportions. It seemed as big as the world. A trip to the moon or the stars would have been scarcely more fabulous, but Kandima kept her eye on the little traveling cage which contained all her new finery, especially the pillow in rosebud pajamas. It had been arranged by Tuon that Kandima should share a cabin with an older Dusun girl named Gar, who was going to Singapore for medical attention, and who could speak her dialect. The two became friends at sight. Tuon unpacked Kandima's pillow and blanket. After some words of encouragement to both girls, Tuon said goodbye and left them to his brother's family. Goodbye, goodbye, the words floated back as the good ship put out to sea. Look, Kandima, Tuon has taken off his cat hat and is still waving. Sure enough, there was the familiar figure in the khaki suit, waving his white sun helmet. The vessel turned and passed behind the island. When it emerged on the distant side, objects on the wharf could no longer be clearly distinguished. Now the Guru, or uncle, as Kandima had learned to call him, said that the little ones had better get settled down, because the sea was a bit rough. I will see that you get your supper, he promised as he guided the two Dosan girls to their cabin below. No one had told Kandima about seasickness. I don't want any supper, she whispered when it was brought. My head is whirling round and round. I want to go back to the Tuon's house. I don't like the valley of water. Uncle smiled at her. You will soon get your sea legs, and then you will feel as good as new. Kandima didn't think she would ever feel good again. She complained to her friend Gar. The older girl tried to comfort her the best she could, being in the same state of mind herself. The new pillow got a few tears cried onto it. Then Kandima remembered how Sadoy had looked, kneeling with her lovely face uplifted. She remembered the group of singing children in the big house, and how they all knelt to pray at bedtime. She remembered the story of the little girl who was hit by the stone. She lay quiet for a long time. Gar thought her little friend had gone to sleep at last. Then Candima slipped out of the berth and knelt for a moment by its side. Strangely comforted, she crawled under her new blanket and was sound asleep. Some time in the night, Candima awoke. For a moment, she couldn't think where she was. This was not the little hut on the mountainside or the gardener's house at Tuon's place. Then the realization came to her that she was on the ship, the great, beautiful ship. It was taking her to Singapore, where she would find powerful medicine for her eye. The great, beautiful ship was making hard work of the task. Kadima felt herself going lower and lower as into a deep valley. Then she was tossed up again. Her head felt a sinking sensation as though she were standing on it. Then she felt Then her feet felt as if they hit the bottom of the berth as she rose again. The great beautiful ship did not smell good. Dank, moldy odors crept in the door, which was latched partly open. A feeble light came from the hall outside the door. Oh, what a miserable feeling! She turned and braced herself as the good ship plunged and corkscrewed in the rough sea. There was a small round window over the berth. It was screwed tight shut, but the glass was clear. Kadima got up. She hung onto the heavy screw of the window with one hand and braced herself with the other. Then she looked out. The moon shone overhead. 1,000 stars twinkled out of the night, but Kadima did not notice them. She was observing only one thing, the troubled water. The surface of the sea was arranged in hills and valleys. The ship must climb over the hills and descend into each valley between. Frequently, one of the hills of water would explode in a wash of white spray and strike the round window, a resounding slap. At first, Kadima drew back from these in fear, but seeing that not a drop of water entered, she grew bold and lay her face against the cool glass. She enjoyed the smooth, moist dampness. The ship seemed so great when she climbed aboard, seemed but a tiny thing now in the midst of this boundless waste of moving water. How could it ever be found again? It would be lost in all these hills and valleys. No one could see the way. Was anyone awake on the ship? Kadima slipped out of her berth. She unlatched the door and fastened it again behind her. A heavy rail extended the whole length of the hall. She held onto it to steady herself on the dizzy journey. At last she came to the stairway leading to the upper deck. It was there she had stood the evening before, waving goodbye to Tuon and the rest. She climbed the stairs. The saloon deck was deserted. She walked clear to the end, hanging on to another convenient rail. Then she saw the little ladder leading up. Up. That was where she wanted to go. Up and out of this tumbling confusion of turbulent water. She mounted the ladder like a little monkey and stood on the ship's bridge. There was a room with glass all around it. Inside the room, a gray-haired man was bending over some papers spread on a table. In front of the glass room was a great wheel. Another man stood before it, turning it a little every time the ship approached the hill of water. Kadima stood quietly watching the two men. These are the drivers of the ship, she convinced herself. They do not sleep. The gray-haired man smiled as he looked at the papers. The drivers are not afraid, she encouraged herself. They do not feel lost. With this comforting assurance, she turned and descended the ladder. Her naked feet had just touched the heavy deck when two strong arms caught her. What is the child doing, climbing about in the middle of the night? It was a pleasant voice. Kadima turned to see and looked into the face of a sailor. An exclamation of fright broke from his lips. He set her down quietly. Bewildered for a moment, she stood quite still. Then she found the stairs, descended to the lower deck, and returned to her cabin. She let herself in and snuggled down to sleep under the red blanket, secure in the knowledge that the drivers of the ship were awake and evidently knew their way. It was late when Kadima awoke. The steward was standing by her berth. Uncle was with him. "How is our little mountain girl this morning?" he inquired in a cheerful voice. "We are sailing in smoother waters now. You will feel better today." The breakfast the steward had brought her looked good. Kadima sat up and tasted it, then finished the bowl of rice gruel and fish. Gar was feeling better too. The girls looked out the window. The sea was much smoother now. The waves were very tiny, and the ship plowed through them without rising or falling. To the left, the coast of Borneo was plainly visible. The mountain lay purple against the gray sky, and the green ocean glittered in the sunlight. Uncle came back after an hour with a large picture book. He laid it in Kadima's lap as she crossed legs on the berth. "This will amuse you, little one," he said. Then, opening the book, he pointed to the pictures of strange houses, people and flowers, trees and animals, such as neither of the girls had seen in all their lives. They spent hours looking at the pictures and wondering about them. "This animal must be a water buffalo, but his nose drags close to the ground, and his ears are so big. No, it can't be a water buffalo." Gar studied the picture. "I've heard my father tell of such an animal. It is used by men to lift heavy logs and for riding. My father said they sometimes build little houses and place them on the animal's back. They decorate them with beautiful cloth, and rich people and rajas ride in them. I should like to see such an animal." Gandima regarded it with a thoughtful interest. Her eye was tired from looking at pictures so long. The day had passed quickly, and it was evening again, and the sea was calm as a lake. "We will anchor at midnight and tie alongside at dawn." Uncle stuck his head in the cabin door after both girls were rolled in their blankets for the night. "Are we halfway to Singapore, Uncle?" Kadima inquired. "No, child, but we are going to spend a day loading water buffalo tomorrow." At midnight, Kadima roused from her heavy sleep enough to be aware of the great stillness. The throb of the engine had ceased. In the silence, she heard the sound of a heavy chain running through iron. Then all was quiet. The girls wakened at dawn with the noise of activity everywhere. They pressed their faces against the small window. There was a town visible in the background, and in the foreground was a wharf of heavy planks with large iron knobs set in the edge. Great loops of heavy cable were fastened around the knobs, and the ship was slowly drawing nearer to the wharf. Kadima pulled her new blue dress, put on her new blue dress, and ascended with Gar to the deck, where they could watch the loading. Already the wharf was alive with pushing, shouting coolies. Piles of rubber and bales of merchandise were stacked about. The noise of the machinery could be heard from the front of the ship. A long metal arm swung out over the wharf. A great iron hook dangled from the end of it. A man snatched the hook and fastened it in a bale of merchandise on the wharf. Then the giant arm raised the bale and swung it over the side of the ship, depositing it gently on the deck. Busy workers rolled it away. "How does the arm know when to turn?" asked Candima of Gar. "What makes the hook go up and down?" "Go up, forward, and you see for yourself," answered Gar, who had long ago become discouraged trying to answer Candima's questions. "It is a man who does it," she informed her friend when she returned. "The man thinks, and the arm and the hook do the work." At noon, the loading of water buffalo began. A herd of them was driven onto the wharf. The heavy hook swung out overhead. A band of heavy canvas was passed under the body of the buffalo cow. The two ends of the band were strong loops. These were passed over the hook, which was lowered to the level of the animal's back. Then the hook began to move upward. The band tightened around the frightened buffalo. Her feet left the wharf, and she flew into the air. The great arm swung her, bellowing and kicking, over the deck, then let her carefully down into the hold. One by one the great animals were loaded. Candima exclaimed to Gar, "How silly they are! They should be glad to have a fine flying ride like that." A memory stirred in her mind, and she added, "Of course, I suppose they never saw a ship or a hook before, so perhaps we shouldn't blame them." The following day the sea was rough again. Neither of the girls wanted to leave their berths to see the water buffalo unloaded at Murray. That evening, when the boat sailed from the Murray anchorage, she headed straight west, and soon the mountains of Borneo were left behind. There was nothing to be seen in any direction but endless waves of troubled water. 3 days later, the good ship anchored in Singapore harbor. Candima felt that she had a good deal of the world, but one glimpse of the busy streets of that truly great city gave her the feeling she had the first time she had seen the red bus. This time there was no place to run. She held tightly to the hand of Uncle, dressed in her pretty yellow dress, wearing shoes for the first time in her life. Candima was whisked away by motor car to the sunny compound where Uncle and his family live. Gar was taken with them. On the following morning, Uncle, true to his promise, took both girls to the general hospital and made all arrangements for their care. Gar was sent to the women's ward and Candima to the children's ward. They did not see each other again.